Welcome back to Peaceful Soul, the place where we share real stories and practical medical insights to help you rediscover peace of mind. Today, I'd like to invite you on a journey into the world of anxiety disorders, a silent struggle that deeply affects countless lives. Have you ever found yourself in this situation? It's late at night, the clock shows 2 a.m., yet you're still tossing and turning in bed. Your eyes are wide open, your heart racing faster than usual. A vague sense of dread creeps in, making it hard to breathe. Your chest feels heavy, and your mind spins with endless questions. Am I sick? Why is my heart pounding like this? How will I ever get through work tomorrow? You try to calm yourself, taking deep breaths, sipping a glass of water, reassuring yourself that everything is fine. But the harder you fight the worry, the more fear seems to take over. By the time the morning light breaks, your body is exhausted, your eyes are tired, and yet, sleep has never come. This story is all too familiar. I've met countless patients walking into the hospital with the exact same concerns. They were convinced they had heart disease, lung problems, or some dangerous illness, but after thorough medical tests, their results showed they were physically healthy. The real issue wasn't in their hearts or lungs, it was in their minds. This is the classic picture of an anxiety disorder, a silent condition that is becoming more and more common in our modern world. It often begins with small worries, stress about work, finances, or family, but if left unchecked, anxiety can grow powerful enough to take over your entire life, disturbing sleep, impairing memory, damaging relationships, and weakening your health. In over 20 years of practice, I've witnessed many such cases. One man, David, 42 years old, found himself living in constant fear after the COVID-19 pandemic. Every time he coughed, he immediately thought he had lung cancer, even though he went to multiple hospitals and received normal results every time. His fear never left him. Each night, he lay awake with a racing heart, drenched in cold sweat. This was a clear example of health-related anxiety. The truth is, no one can live without some worry. But the line between normal concern and an anxiety disorder is incredibly thin. The real question is, how can we tell them apart? When does worry become a medical issue that deserves attention? First, we need to understand that anxiety itself is a natural human response. Think of it as an alarm bell that helps us prepare for challenges. A student nervous before an exam, a mother concerned when her child has a fever, or an employee stressed before an important meeting. These are all normal. In fact, a reasonable amount of anxiety can even be beneficial, because it sharpens our focus and motivates us to act. But when anxiety becomes excessive, lasting for weeks or even months, and especially when it comes with physical symptoms like a racing heart, insomnia, stomach pain, shaky hands, or shortness of breath, that's when we're no longer talking about ordinary worry. That is an anxiety disorder. The key difference lies in the consequences. Normal anxiety helps you prepare and move forward. An anxiety disorder does the opposite. It drains you, holding you back, and reducing your quality of life. I often compare it to a small flame in the kitchen. That flame is necessary to cook your meals. But if it grows out of control, it turns into a fire that can burn down the whole house. From a scientific standpoint, anxiety disorders are not just emotions. They are the result of a complex chain of reactions in the brain. When you feel anxious, the amygdala, the brain's alarm center, sends out warning signals. Your body releases stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. These chemicals speed up your heart rate, raise your blood pressure, and tighten your muscles, preparing you for a fight or flight response. If this reaction happens only once in a while, the body can recover quickly. But if it's triggered repeatedly, the brain begins to form a habit of anxiety. At that point, even the smallest trigger can set off the entire stress response, keeping your body stuck in a constant state of alert, day and night. This explains why some people worry about things that seem irrational. They know their fears aren't logical, yet they can't stop themselves. That's when anxiety stops being an ally and becomes a true burden. So, to put it simply, normal worry helps you act better, while anxiety disorders trap you and paralyze your life. And to understand this condition more clearly, in the next chapter we'll explore the most common types of anxiety disorders and how to recognize the early warning signs. exploring the different types of anxiety disorders and the real stories behind them. When we talk about anxiety, many people think of it as nothing more than a fleeting nervousness before an exam, a job interview, or an unexpected life event. But modern medicine has shown that anxiety is far more than a passing feeling. It can take many forms, persist over time, and repeat itself in ways powerful enough to change how a person lives, works, and loves. To understand more deeply, let's look at the most common types of anxiety disorders that doctors and psychologists encounter in clinical practice. One of the most well-known forms is generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD. People living with GAD exist in a constant state of worry. They worry about ordinary things: work, finances, health, family. But what makes GAD unique is that the anxiety isn't tied to one specific reason. Instead, it's like an undercurrent, always present, ready to sweep them away at any moment. I once treated a patient named Laura, a high school teacher. She came into my clinic with dark circles under her eyes from chronic insomnia. Laura shared that even when everything at school was perfectly fine, her heart would still race, and her mind couldn't stop creating worst-case scenarios. She described it as a radio that never turned off, draining her both physically and emotionally. Another common form is panic disorder. This is when sudden waves of panic strike, making people feel as though they're about to die, faint, or lose control. Typical symptoms include a pounding heart, shortness of breath, sweating, and dizziness. I recall a patient named David, a 35-year-old banker. During an important meeting, he suddenly felt his chest tighten, his breathing quicken, and his body shake uncontrollably. Convinced he was having a heart attack, he called for emergency help. But all cardiac tests came back normal. Only later, with the help of a psychologist, did he realize he had experienced a panic attack, a hallmark of panic disorder. Then, there are phobias, intense, irrational fears linked to a specific object or situation. These fears might involve heights, enclosed spaces, or even small animals like spiders or mice. I once met Emily, a young woman with a promising career in marketing. Yet, she had an overwhelming fear of flying. Just the thought of stepping onto a plane made her heart pound. Her palms sweat, and her body nearly freeze. Because her company often required travel, Emily turned down many opportunities for advancement. What seemed like a simple fear was enough to alter the course of her career and future. Another form is obsessive-compulsive disorder, or OCD. In OCD, people are haunted by unwanted thoughts and feel compelled to perform repetitive actions to ease their anxiety. For instance, washing hands dozens of times a day for fear of contamination, or checking doors and locks over and over again. I once spoke with Michael, a gifted engineer, whose life was dominated by checking light switches. Every morning before leaving home, he spent more than half an hour making sure every light was turned off. He knew it was irrational, but without the ritual, he couldn't leave in peace. This constant routine made him late for work and cost him valuable career opportunities. And then, there is social anxiety disorder, where the fear doesn't stem from objects or events, but from people themselves. Those with social anxiety constantly worry about being judged, embarrassed, or ridiculed when facing others. Sarah, a bright university student, was a clear example. She avoided class presentations at all costs. The moment she stood in front of her peers, her face flushed red, her body trembled, and words refused to come out. Over time, Sarah withdrew, limiting her interactions, missing opportunities to learn and connect with friends. Each type of anxiety disorder has its own unique features, but what they share in common is the invisible barrier they create in a person's life, a barrier that prevents them from living fully and enjoying the ordinary moments they truly deserve. The key is to recognize that anxiety is not just a fleeting feeling. It can become a genuine medical condition, and like any other illness, anxiety disorders can be diagnosed, treated, and managed effectively if we understand them. So, what are the causes and biological mechanisms of anxiety? When people hear the word anxiety, they often think of it as nothing more than a passing state of mind. But in reality, anxiety is the result of a complex chain of biological reactions in the body. To illustrate, let me tell you about David, a patient who came to see me after struggling with chronic insomnia and sudden episodes of a racing heartbeat. David described how, every time he had to give a presentation, his palms would sweat, his hands would shake, and his mind would go completely blank. Even something as simple as going to a crowded supermarket left him feeling restless, as if something terrible was about to happen. When I explained to David that his brain and body were overreacting, he finally felt a sense of relief, as though he had found the missing piece to his suffering. The truth is, anxiety stems from a deeply natural survival mechanism. Back in prehistoric times, when our ancestors faced dangers like wild animals, the brain would instantly trigger the fight or flight response. The amygdala, the brain's alarm system, would activate, sending signals to the adrenal glands to release adrenaline and cortisol. These stress hormones sped up the heartbeat, tightened muscles, and quickened breathing, all to prepare the body for quick action and self-defense. The problem is that in today's modern world, we rarely face wild animals, but the brain doesn't distinguish between a tiger and a stressful meeting. As a result, this ancient survival system gets triggered again and again, creating persistent anxiety. I also remember a patient named Linda, a high school teacher. Every time she walked into her classroom, the pressure of dozens of eyes staring back at her made her sweat and sent her heart racing. Rationally, she knew she was safe, but her body reacted as though she were in danger. It's a powerful reminder that anxiety isn't just in the mind, it's a complex dance between psychology and biology. Science has also revealed that anxiety is closely tied to imbalances in brain neurotransmitters, especially serotonin, dopamine, and GABA. Serotonin regulates mood, dopamine influences motivation and reward, and GABA works like a brake, helping the brain relax. When these systems are disrupted, the brain becomes hypersensitive to ordinary situations, giving rise to overwhelming anxiety. Genetics also plays a role. If anxiety or depression runs in your family, your risk may be higher. But genetics is not destiny. I once worked with Michael, whose father battled anxiety most of his life. Instead of giving in, Michael took proactive steps: regular exercise, meditation, and a healthy lifestyle. By doing so, he managed to keep his own anxiety under control. He's living proof that we can change our path, even with inherited vulnerabilities. Finally, our environment and life experiences leave their mark as well. Events such as job loss, divorce, or a difficult childhood can sensitize the amygdala, making it more reactive than normal. Just like Linda, even small situations can trigger an outsized anxiety response. When we look closely at the biology of anxiety, we see that it isn't a sign of weakness. It's the body's natural survival system, one that's been accidentally switched into the wrong mode. And the encouraging news is this: if the system can be thrown off balance, it can also be reset. Through medical treatments and lifestyle changes, we can bring it back into harmony. Let's explore the impact of anxiety on the body and daily life. I want to begin with a story that many of us may have lived through ourselves, or at least witnessed in someone we care about. I once met Sarah, a woman in her early 40s who worked in accounting. She came to my clinic with a mix of symptoms that seemed unrelated: dull headaches, a racing heart, restless nights, constant fatigue, and trouble focusing at work. At first, Sarah believed it was simply the pressure of her workload. But as we dug deeper, it became clear that the real root cause wasn't just a demanding schedule. It was prolonged anxiety slowly eroding her health and her daily life. Anxiety isn't just a feeling that lives in the mind, it leaves a very real imprint on the body. Biologically, when the brain senses danger, the autonomic nervous system flips into alarm mode. The heartbeat accelerates, breathing grows shallow and rapid, muscles tense, and sweat glands switch on. In the short term, this is useful. It prepares us to respond quickly to challenges. But when the body is held in this state day after day, it begins to wear us down like water dripping endlessly onto stone. One of the systems most affected is the cardiovascular system. Chronic anxiety keeps the heart beating faster and blood pressure higher than normal. For those already at risk of heart disease, this is like pouring fuel onto the fire. Several of my patients have described it as living with a ticking time bomb in their chest. The digestive system also suffers. Many people experience stomach pain, bloating, diarrhea, or chronic constipation without any clear medical cause. In reality, Anxiety interferes with gut motility, throwing digestion out of balance. I once treated David, a man who had battled irritable bowel syndrome for years. It wasn't until he learned to manage his anxiety that his severe abdominal pain and digestive troubles finally began to ease. The immune system, too, weakens under prolonged stress. Those with chronic anxiety often catch colds more easily, develop infections, or take longer to recover from illnesses. It's as if their immune system is a defense army forced to stand on high alert for false alarms, only to be too exhausted when the real enemy arrives. But anxiety doesn't stop at the physical body. It seeps into every corner of life. People with anxiety often struggle to concentrate, make decisions, or take action, which harms productivity, relationships, and even self-confidence. A colleague once told me about a brilliant medical student who failed multiple exams, not because he lacked knowledge, but because anxiety robbed him of sleep and drained his mind the moment he walked into the testing room. In personal relationships, anxiety acts like an invisible wall. Those affected may withdraw, avoid social contact, or snap at loved ones simply because they live in constant tension. Sarah, the accountant I mentioned earlier, once confided that she felt like she was living in two worlds, the outer world, where everyone thought she was fine, and her inner world, filled with worry and fear that no one could see. Left unchecked, anxiety is like a creeping vine. At first, it clings to just one corner, but slowly it spreads, covering the entire garden, blocking out sunlight, and weakening everything it touches. Its effects are not just short-term fatigue. They can leave long-lasting marks on health and overall quality of life. That's why recognizing these impacts early is so important. When we notice vague signs like insomnia, stomach pain, a racing heartbeat, or an endless loop of vague worries, it's a signal. That's the moment to pause, look deeper into the root cause, and not just patch over the symptoms. Now, let's look at the methods of diagnosis and the medical approaches in treating anxiety. When I first began my medical career, one of the greatest challenges wasn't the lack of treatment options, it was how to make an accurate diagnosis. Unlike conditions with obvious signs, like pneumonia or a broken bone, anxiety often hides behind layers of vague symptoms. Some patients would come to me with a racing heart, sweating, and a lump in the throat sensation. At first, they thought it was heart disease. Others complained of chronic stomach pain, endless insomnia, only to later discover that the real root cause was anxiety. That's why diagnosing anxiety requires patience, careful attention, and a truly holistic perspective. Clinical diagnosis. In practice, the process always begins with a conversation. I ask patients about their medical history, the symptoms they've experienced, when they began, and how much they interfere with daily life. Simple questions like, have you ever noticed your heart racing at night? Or, do you often find yourself expecting the worst to happen? Can unlock an entire picture of mental health. Of course, standardized scales help bring clarity. For example, the Generalized Anxiety Disorder 7 is a short but powerful questionnaire that allows doctors to assess the severity of generalized anxiety. Another is the Hamilton Anxiety Rating Scale, often used in clinical research to track changes in symptoms after treatment. These tools don't replace clinical experience, but they serve as maps, helping us navigate what can otherwise feel like a dense forest. Ruling out other conditions. One of the most important parts of diagnosis is not to rush. Many anxiety symptoms overlap with physical illnesses. For example, patients with hyperthyroidism may feel restless, shaky, and sweaty. Those with arrhythmias may experience palpitations that mimic panic attacks. If we only look at the surface, it's easy to misdiagnose. That's why I often order blood tests, an electrocardiogram, or even a cardiac ultrasound if needed. Not to make things difficult for the patient, but to make sure we don't miss something serious. If all the tests come back normal, yet the patient continues to struggle with relentless anxiety, only then can we be confident the root lies in the nervous system and the mind, not the heart or the thyroid. Medical approaches to treatment. Once we have an accurate diagnosis, the next step is treatment. Modern medicine no longer dismisses anxiety as simply a sign of mental weakness, as it was viewed decades ago. Today, we understand that anxiety has a biological foundation. tied to imbalances in the nervous system and brain neurotransmitters. That's why treatment must be comprehensive, combining medication, psychotherapy, and lifestyle changes. Medication. In many cases, medication plays an important role, especially when anxiety severely disrupts daily life and work. Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs, or serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors, SNRIs, are often the first-line choice. They don't work instantly, but over a few weeks, they can significantly reduce anxiety symptoms. I recall David, a 35-year-old software engineer who came to me after months of insomnia and persistent fear that his career was falling apart. After trying therapy with limited results, we decided to introduce an SSRI. 2 months later, David returned, smiling for the first time in a long while. He said, "I don't feel like I'm being chased by a predator anymore." Psychotherapy. No discussion of anxiety treatment is complete without psychotherapy, especially cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. This method has been proven effective in hundreds of studies. CBT helps patients recognize distorted thoughts and replace them with more realistic, constructive perspectives. I often describe CBT as teaching the mind a new filter. So life is no longer viewed only through the lens of fear. Take Sarah, for example, a school teacher who constantly feared making mistakes in front of her students. After 12 CBT sessions, she learned to challenge those fears with actual evidence. Instead of thinking, "I'm bound to fail in front of the class," she shifted to, "I've successfully taught hundreds of lessons, and mistakes happen to everyone." From there, Sarah became calmer and more confident in the classroom. Lifestyle changes. Equally important is building a healthier lifestyle. Research shows that regular exercise, adequate sleep, and balanced nutrition can dramatically reduce anxiety levels. I usually encourage patients to start small, maybe a 30-minute walk each day or cutting back on evening coffee. These may seem like small steps, but over time, they create powerful, lasting change. The importance of collaboration. Anxiety is not something most people can simply overcome alone. It requires collaboration between the doctor, the therapist, and the patient. I always emphasize this. Medication can ease the symptoms. Therapy can reshape the way we think. But it is the patient's persistence in maintaining lifestyle changes that truly builds a foundation for long-term recovery. Don't turn off the video just yet, because up next are the self-care methods and personalized strategies to manage anxiety. It's time we talk about perhaps the most important aspect of facing anxiety: taking care of yourself. If the previous chapters helped you understand what anxiety is, how it operates, and why it affects both your body and your life, then this chapter is the bridge that turns theory into practice. Because medical knowledge remains just information, unless you turn it into daily action. I once met a patient named Michael, a man in his 40s working in the tech industry. The pressure of his job and a fast-paced lifestyle pushed him into chronic anxiety. When he first came to see me, Michael believed that only medication could help him. But through many conversations, I realized that the most important thing was teaching him how to care for himself, small, steady steps that gradually helped his body and mind regain balance. The very first, and perhaps the most fundamental method, is learning how to breathe correctly. It sounds simple, but most of us breathe shallow and fast when anxious. The breath stays stuck in the chest, making the body even more tense. I guided Michael to practice abdominal breathing, inhaling deeply through the nose, letting the belly expand, holding for a few seconds, and then exhaling slowly. He practiced daily, and after just 2 weeks, he told me his sudden panic attacks had noticeably decreased. Slow breathing is like a message sent to the nervous system saying, "Everything is okay. There is no danger." Alongside breathing, quality sleep plays a vital role. Imagine, how can the brain process emotions and stress if it doesn't get proper rest? I often advise patients to establish a bedtime ritual, turning off devices at least an hour before bed, reading a few pages of a calming book, or listening to soft music. For Michael, his ritual was writing down 3 things he was grateful for every night. That simple act allowed him to end the day with peace, instead of carrying work stress into his dreams. Next comes nutrition, an often overlooked factor when it comes to anxiety. What we eat not only fuels the body but also directly impacts the nervous system. Foods high in sugar and caffeine can speed up the heart, worsening feelings of anxiety. I often recommend patients focus on vegetables, whole grains, omega-3 rich fish, and staying hydrated. Michael used to drink 4 cups of coffee a day, and simply cutting back to 1 cup made a huge difference in his mood. Another key strategy is physical activity. Research shows that regular exercise can be as effective as mild anti-anxiety medication. When you move, your body releases endorphins, chemicals that improve mood and reduce stress. But beyond the biology, exercise gives people a sense of control. Michael didn't enjoy going to the gym, but he loved nature, so I suggested he take a brisk 30-minute walk in the nearby park each morning. The natural scenery, morning sunlight, and birdsong became his natural tranquilizer. At the same time, practicing mindfulness is also a powerful tool. Anxiety often pulls us into the past or pushes us into the future, leaving the mind wandering in worry. Mindfulness brings you back to the present, the only place you actually have control. Something as simple as drinking tea, instead of sipping while scrolling your phone. Focus entirely on the aroma, the warmth, the taste on your tongue. Just a few minutes of full presence is enough to give your brain rest. And here's something I always emphasize. Everyone needs a personalized strategy. There is no one-size-fits-all formula. Some people find yoga helpful. Others prefer journaling or painting. For Michael, the right mix was abdominal breathing, outdoor walking, and writing an emotional journal. On this journey, the key is not to change quickly, but to stay consistent. Just like muscles grow only with regular training, your mind becomes resilient only with daily care. And finally, I want you to remember, self-care doesn't mean doing something grand. Sometimes, it's as simple as allowing yourself 10 minutes of rest during the day, calling a close friend, or stepping onto the balcony to take a few deep breaths. It's these small habits, repeated over time, that create profound transformation. Now, let's move on to the specialized treatments and modern medical approaches for anxiety. On the journey of understanding and facing anxiety, there are moments when self-care and lifestyle changes alone are simply not enough. When anxiety becomes prolonged and starts to severely impact health, work, or relationships, that's when specialized treatments, grounded in modern medicine, become the key to restoring balance. One of the first pillars is psychotherapy. Among these, cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is often considered the gold standard. In CBT, the therapist helps patients identify distorted, negative thought patterns and gradually replace them with more realistic, constructive ones. For example, a patient who constantly worries, "If I leave the house, something bad will definitely happen," is guided to challenge that belief, starting with small steps, like taking a short walk and noticing that nothing terrible actually occurs. Over time, the brain learns to adjust its responses, breaking the cycle of anxiety. Beyond CBT, there are other therapies such as acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, and exposure therapy. ACT helps patients accept anxious feelings rather than fighting to eliminate them, while encouraging them to live in alignment with their personal values. Exposure therapy, on the other hand, involves gradually and safely confronting anxiety-provoking situations, from mild to more challenging, so that fear loses its grip. Alongside psychotherapy, medication plays an important role in many cases. Commonly prescribed classes include antidepressants, SSRIs, SNRIs. These help rebalance neurotransmitters in the brain, especially useful for patients experiencing both anxiety and depression. Benzodiazepines. These can bring rapid relief during acute anxiety episodes but should only be used short-term to avoid dependence. Beta blockers. Often prescribed for physical symptoms like rapid heartbeat or trembling, particularly in social anxiety or stressful situations such as public speaking. It's important to emphasize that medication should always be monitored closely by a physician, since every body responds differently, and side effects must be carefully managed. Thanks to advances in modern medicine, new approaches are also emerging. Transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS, and transcranial direct current stimulation, TDCS, are non-invasive technologies that directly influence brain activity. helping to regulate dysfunctional neural networks involved in anxiety. While still under ongoing research, these methods show great promise, especially for patients who don't respond well to traditional medication. But modern treatment doesn't end there. Today, integrative approaches are gaining ground, combining modern medicine with complementary therapies such as mindfulness meditation, therapeutic yoga, acupuncture, or even music therapy. When applied thoughtfully, these methods not only ease stress but also improve overall quality of life, giving patients a greater sense of agency in their healing journey. I once worked with a patient named Sarah, a 45-year-old tech manager who had struggled with chronic anxiety for years. She had tried various self-care methods without much progress. When she entered a combined treatment program, Sarah was prescribed a low dose of antidepressants, attended weekly CBT sessions, and practiced yoga and meditation for 20 minutes daily. After 6 months, the transformation was striking. Her sleep improved, her anxiety attacks became less frequent, and most importantly, Sarah felt like she was back in control of her life. Her story is a powerful example of the strength of a comprehensive approach, where modern medicine and supportive therapies work hand in hand. In summary, specialized treatment for anxiety isn't just about taking medication or seeing a therapist, it's a scientific blend of psychology, pharmacology, neurotechnology, and complementary care. And when we stop seeing anxiety as weakness, and instead recognize it as a medical condition that can be treated, we open the door for millions of people to find hope and peace within their own lives. In medicine, numbers, studies, and statistical charts can only go so far. What truly touches the heart and allows us to understand anxiety on a deeper level are real-life stories. Because behind every diagnosis is a living, breathing human being, with a past, with dreams, with joys and fears uniquely their own. And their journeys of overcoming anxiety often leave behind lessons that are not only valuable for them, but also for anyone facing this silent struggle. I still remember Linda, a devoted high school teacher. When she first came to see me, she was the embodiment of exhaustion. She could hardly sleep at night, her mind endlessly circling questions like, are my students improving? Do my colleagues think I'm good enough? Am I ruining my entire life just because I'm not perfect? That spiral of worry pushed Linda to the point of physical breakdown. Her blood pressure rose, her heart raced, and even the joy of teaching slipped away. Through a combined treatment of cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness meditation, and a short course of medication, Linda gradually learned how to step back from her negative thoughts. 3 months later, when she returned to my office, she smiled and said, I'm no longer a prisoner of anxiety. I've become its companion, and I've learned how to guide it, instead of letting it control me. The second story comes from James, a young software engineer. Outwardly, James was the picture of success, a good job, steady income, friends who admired him. But behind the polite smile was a mind wound tight like a wire. Sudden panic attacks in the middle of the night made him feel as if he were about to die of a heart attack. He went to the ER multiple times, only to be reassured that his heart was perfectly healthy. It wasn't until he began therapy that James discovered he was living with panic disorder, a specific form of anxiety. With professional guidance, he learned to recognize his early warning signs, make lifestyle changes, and gradually face situations he used to avoid. 6 months later, James was able to fly again, something he had completely avoided before. Terrified of having a panic attack mid-air. Another case I'll never forget is Margaret, a single mother in her 40s. For her, anxiety was intertwined with the heavy responsibility of raising her son. When he reached his teenage years, Margaret was haunted by fears. If I fail, he'll go down the wrong path. If I lose my job, what will his future look like? These thoughts became an unbearable weight. She once admitted that at times, she doubted she had the strength to go on. But through a support therapy group, Margaret found encouragement in other mothers who were also battling anxiety. Together, they shared, listened, and learned to accept that no one can control everything. Little by little, Margaret built a more balanced life. Most importantly, her relationship with her son grew stronger and more open than ever before. Stories like those of Linda, James, and Margaret are just 3 of the thousands I've witnessed. What they share is not luck, it's the determination to seek help. the courage to face their fears, and the persistence to keep walking the road to recovery. Anxiety is never the end of the story. It's a challenge, one that can be overcome. Looking back, each patient has taught me something invaluable. Linda showed me the power of patience and self-compassion. James reminded me that modern science can open new doors, but personal will is the key that unlocks them. And Margaret proved that community and human connection can be a therapy more powerful than any medication. Perhaps you're listening to this right now and wondering, can I really change? Do I have the strength to get through this? The answer is yes, because the people I just mentioned weren't superheroes. They were ordinary people, who stumbled, who despaired, but who stood back up and kept moving forward. And you can, too. This chapter isn't just about telling stories. It's here to remind you that you are not alone. Anxiety may be part of the human journey, but it does not define your entire life. What defines you is the choice you make, whether to let it control you, or to bravely learn how to take control of it. As this journey draws to a close, I'd like us to pause for a moment and reflect on everything we've discovered together. From the very beginning, we've seen that anxiety is not just a fleeting emotion, but a complex experience shaped by biology, environment, and each person's unique history. We've learned to recognize the different types of anxiety disorders, explored the biological mechanisms behind them, understood their impact on health and daily life, and walked through the steps of diagnosis, treatment, and self-care strategies. Most importantly, we've witnessed real stories of people who faced their fears, stumbled, and rose again, proving that overcoming anxiety is absolutely possible. The most important lesson I hope you carry with you is this: anxiety is not a life sentence, it's a reminder. A reminder that both body and mind need to be heard. A reminder that each of us has limits. And when those limits are pushed too far, the body speaks up. Yet at the same time, anxiety teaches us that within our vulnerability lies our strength. In learning how to manage it, we discover how to slow down, care for ourselves more deeply, and connect more meaningfully with those around us. I'm reminded of one of my former patients, James, a talented engineer who spent years trapped in the cycle of anxiety. He once told me, "I thought being strong meant enduring everything in silence, until my body collapsed and my mind shattered." But strength isn't suppression. It's having the courage to speak up, to seek help. After a long journey of therapy, a necessary course of medication, and consistent self-care, James recovered. Today, he is still an accomplished engineer, but more importantly, he is someone who knows how to listen to his body, love himself, and live with balance. The journeys of James, Maria, and thousands of others, including perhaps your own, show us that anxiety is not an endless darkness. It's a path, sometimes uneven and rocky, yes, but one that leads us toward a stronger, wiser version of ourselves. So what lies ahead? As a physician who has spent many years researching and walking alongside patients, I believe the future of mental health lies not only in medication or advanced technology, but in connection between doctors and patients, between science and daily life, between modern medicine and timeless wisdom, and most of all, the connection each of us builds with ourselves. We are stepping into an era where mental health is no longer hidden or dismissed. Society is opening up, sharing more, and seeking healing in a more holistic way. And this future does not belong only to professionals, it belongs to all of us. To those who dare to face anxiety, to seek help, and to live fully. Before we close, I want to leave you with this message. If you are living with anxiety, remember, you are not alone. Start with small steps. Reach out to those you trust. Don't hesitate to seek medical support. See this not as a battle to be fought, but as a journey of discovery, of strength, patience, and self-compassion. And finally, if what I've shared today has helped you gain clarity or brought a bit of light to your path, I'd love for you to share your own story in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe so we can continue this journey together in future episodes, where we'll explore even more dimensions of physical and mental health. Who knows, your story might just inspire someone else, the same way the stories you've heard today have inspired you. You deserve a life of peace, and I truly believe you can create it.